Hi, you guys. Welcome back. This is Richard Sachs here with Doug Diamond of DiamondDiscAudio.com. This is Lost Arts Radio Live. Sorry about last week, not being here. We had a truck run into a critical power pole, and that was the end of the transmission for last week. So sorry about that, but we've got everything saved from before, and this is going to be some really incredible information, along with a great guest, Patrick Wood. Patrick's a friend of ours. He's been on Lost Arts Radio before on the Sunday guest show. This is the first time of having him on live with you. I think it'll be a great conversation. The context of this meeting, as I'm sure you are aware, is that America and the rest of the world is under attack right now. I'm sitting in America at the moment, and the situation here is more serious than, in my opinion, the attack on Pearl Harbor in World War II. It's really kind of an unprecedented scale of assault in the world in recorded history that I know of, happening on every continent, and it's very coordinated. It's not an attack by a particular country or army or nationality or race or tribe or anything like that. It's an attack of from what people have called the deep state, but there are various definitions of that, and they often talk about the deep state as nefarious people within visible positions of government. In my experience and research, it's coming from far above that level, and ultimately I actually believe a lot of what David Icke says, that it's coming from a non-human level. But the humans are definitely following orders very well. The combination of the ones that are the perpetrators of all this, and us, the regular zombies in the population that are supposed to be oblivious of what's happening and totally terrified of everything, including each other, especially each other, so that we have our attention distracted on that and don't notice that we're being overrun by an incredibly well-coordinated attack. Now, excuse me, that doesn't mean that the virus is not real. The virus that they talk about, it is real, that you have to have faith in the government agencies like I do, and totally trust governments and corporations. They put a lot of hard work and effort into destroying us, and you have to respect all the work they're doing. And in this case, the U.S. government, through a major agency starting with the letter N and has two letters after that, funded their research into creating a weapon at the University BSL-4 lab in one of the East Coast states, not northern, but kind of central. And then they had this irritation because there was a convention against biological weapons development written by Francis Boyle and passed by both houses of Congress unanimously and signed by George Herbert Walker Bush. I think that was in 1989. And that became problematic and too much pressure, so they had to sub out the work, but with a U.S. grant so that they'd have plenty of research and development money to the BSL-4 lab in Wuhan. And that's where the final touches were put on this particular weapon. So the virus is absolutely real. I agree with the corrupt health agencies on that completely, although they're having trouble admitting that it came straight out of the lab. But the problem is they've started a lot of pandemics that have really been disappointing. They've fizzled out. They haven't killed enough people and to really cause mass panic. And this time they decided, look, we can't guarantee that the pandemic is actually going to work physically. It might be a big disappointment, and it looks like this one definitely is. If it wasn't a disappointment, they wouldn't have to pad the numbers and show fake footage of hospitals being overwhelmed and things like that. And I say fake because people are starting to realize, oh, I've got a cell phone. Yeah, it's intended to control me, which it will be used that way in the future if we're not able to turn this around. But for the moment, it takes really good videos. And they run down to the hospital that they showed video on, in this case, New York, as being overwhelmed, and the patients just desperate. There's too many of them, and there's no time to take care of them all, and the nurses and doctors are all screaming and crying, and there's mobs in the street trying to get in and they can't get in. So the person runs down there with the cell phone, takes the video, and there's nobody there. It's empty. The doctors and nurses have since come out to be partying because they don't have much of any work to do, so they're trying to use the time well, doing the things that people do in parties. And there's multiple accounts of this from whistleblowers in the hospital staffs, and I mean, there's no question about it. And we had a medical doctor, very brave medical doctor that we interviewed, and we're going to play the recorded interview from it tomorrow on the Sunday show. It was a lady from Montana. She's great, and she was saying, you know, this thing about filling out death certificates, which she's done for decades, CDC guidelines say, look, if you even think it might be COVID-19, you don't need to check it. You don't need to test. You don't have to worry about reviews. None of that's going to happen. Just put it on the death certificate and don't worry about it and have a nice day, and do that as many times as you can. This is literally the CDC guidance. Okay, I'm hoping some people out there are still awake enough to realize the magnitude of what that means. And that gives them the numbers that they then report on TV. And a lot of people, including well-meaning, patriotic people, think, oh my God, the country's being, you know, totally annihilated. But see, here's what they forget. It's not the low death rates that mean that the shutdowns are a bad thing. And they, not just now, they have been from the beginning. Illegal because they're unconstitutional. And in the Constitution, it doesn't say, well, if it's a regular emergency, you can't take away the people's unalienable rights, okay? But if it's a really bad emergency, or especially if it's a really, really bad emergency, then you don't have any rights anymore. But we'll give them back as soon as it's only a bad emergency and not really, really bad. It doesn't have wording like that. And it's not because the founders couldn't think of how to say the things. They had better English than most of us do now by far. You can see the tests they took in elementary school. Most college students now would fail them after being dumbed down systematically in our educational system. So they purposely did not put down a clause that, look, this Bill of Rights thing and all the other rights that we acknowledge exist that are not written down specifically in the Declaration and Constitution, those are what you call unalienable. That means even if you had the worst emergency in the world and everybody was dying and something had a 99% death rate, this is the thing about the American, ideally the American system, if it's put into practice real, which of course it's not right now. Government can't order any of your rights away. Totally impossible. And if we had, you know, good judges and courts that weren't corrupted and things like that, none of this lockdown, shutdown stuff would remain. It's all illegal. But it's not because the death rate is not too bad. That's irrelevant. Government can advise you in America and say, you know, it's really bad to go outside. You should stay in your house, even though it's going to destroy the economy and kill billions of people by starvation, which is the reality. We think that it would be a really good idea for you to do that anyway, which is so super stupid, because now they've just about guaranteed a super depression that's much worse than 1929 because of this amount of time in shutdown. That's not intelligent, you guys. It's not brilliant on the part of the citizens to think that that's reasonable. It has nothing to do with death rates. It has to do with what is your unalienable right. And by the way, the idea in America was that everybody in every country, all parts of the world, has exactly the same rights. Their governments just don't know it, or they know it and aren't going to accept it. So what I wanted to do with our guest today, Patrick Wood, who's an expert on technocracy and has written some really good books, Trilaterals over Washington early, and then Technocracy Rising and Technocracy, The Hard Road to World Order. I think I got those all right. They're all available. I checked this morning on the Evil Company, Amazon, and probably on Patrick's or possibly on Patrick's website, technocracy.news. I'm going to try to add him. And as you guys know, I'm not a brilliant expert in technology myself, but I think I know how to add him. And let's see if it works. He said this morning he was ready to go. And it's a great privilege to have him on the show, I think. So let's see what we can do here. And ultimately, of course, what we need to do is talk about solutions, right? That's going to be what matters. So we're going to get to that. And this is more than a one show. This is like survival of the world type issue. Let's see if Patrick is reachable here. It says he's being added. Come on, Patrick.
Hello, this is Pat.
Good. I'm really glad you're there, Pat. Thank you. I just introduced you. This is Richard.
Oh.
And glad that you were able to come this week. Sorry about the little electrical problem last time.
I know.
So,
and are you calling me on Skype?
I'm calling you on Skype, and we're live on the air right now for the whole world.
Oh, for the whole world. Okay.
Yeah.
Are we going to do a video?
We are on video, yeah. If you can add your picture, that would be wonderful. Unless I'm calling you.
I can.
I called the wrong one? Okay, hold on.
Somehow I'm on my cell phone right now, and I don't think I have video there.
That explains why we don't see your picture. You have you have multiple accounts here.
Yeah, try the 602 number.
Okay, let me see. Well, we're going to try not the home phone. We want the video, the Skype.
That's right. Either Skype, my Skype name, or my telephone number.
Okay, don't say it. Don't say it on the.
Yeah.
Okay.
We just called.
That's much better. It's nice to see you. So let me just tell you briefly what I already said. I talked about your books, and I talked about the situation that is happening in the world right now, in my opinion, more serious than the attack on Pearl Harbor. Can you hear me, Pat?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. You're a little bit faint. Make sure your mic is close enough.
Got to bring my mic right up here to my mouth.
Yeah, that's better. That's better. And so what I was saying is that this is a very sophisticated attack being justified by the so-called pandemic that is very disappointing to them because it's really not killing enough people according to what they hoped. But they decided this time they're just going to go through with it anyway. And there's a very fast acceleration of tyranny. And technocracy is the idea of using the technology to accelerate and clamp down and stabilize tyranny as a permanent system. And the person who knows the most about that, much more than me, is you. So I thought you might want to kind of fit into what I introduced us with.
Absolutely. You know, I've been writing and talking about technocracy now for years and years. I think almost 10 years now.
Right.
It's been a real hard road for me to try to convince people that what we're seeing today was coming. But it was painfully obvious there would come a day when the trap would be sprung, when these giant, corporate-driven technocrats would declare game over and simply go for a grab of total power. And I believe this is what's happened. I think this is the technocrats' coup d'etat. They have sprung on the entire planet all at the same time.
Yeah.
It's masterful in that sense, you could say. I don't agree with it, obviously, but it's a masterful plan.
It's brilliant. Yeah. And just to make sure we include everybody for whom this is a new subject, why don't you tell us what a technocrat is? Because that's central to the whole idea.
Well, the concept of technocracy goes back to the 1930s, at least, at Columbia University, when scientists and engineers at Columbia decided they were going to build a brand new economic system that would replace capitalism and free enterprise. And back in that day, you can imagine the Great Depression. It was a pretty depressing time for the economy, and a lot of people were thinking, man, this thing's going to die. It's going to be done. What are we going to do?
Right.
Well, it didn't die, and it did recover, but these egotistical scientists and engineers at Columbia thought themselves to be brighter than any other, bulb in the box, so to speak, and they out to develop this resource-based economic system. Today, we would know that as sustainable development, green economy, Green New Deal, things like that. That's where all that stuff came from. It dates all the way back to the 1930s. How it got here is kind of a long story, the progression. But my books detail that, and very well. And people go and buy my books on Amazon or from technocracy.news and get all the details on how everything traced forward from the 1930s. But if you can trust me for a minute, it did. And the idea of technocrats back in that day, and it has not changed, is that they hated politicians. They thought politicians were just useless eaters. And they wanted to dismiss every elected official in America. They felt there was no need for anybody to be in, citizen representative government. And they just wanted to dismiss everybody. And they felt that the scientists and engineers better run the economy. And if you have somebody like them running the economy, then they would say, well, then you don't need a political system, do you? Everything is going to be perfect.
Right.
That was their intent. I even I found a rare book from 1933 when FDR was just coming into power. And this book called for Roosevelt to declare himself dictator in order to implement technocracy.
Yeah.
Fortunately, he didn't take us up on it. He didn't take him up on it. And we got the New Deal. That's all we got. That was bad, but we got the New Deal. If he had taken him up on the offer and implemented technocracy right then, who knows where we would be today? I doubt we'd be having this conversation.
Yeah, I agree. You were saying that the New Deal is bad, and I totally agree. It was horrible, but a lot of people now more and more don't see that, because anything that can give you free money, how could it possibly be bad? I mean, what's the rationale behind not liking that?
Well, the nature of the New Deal and the nature of FDR in general was progressivism. Progressivism brings change for the sake of change. And even back in that day, it relied on science to do that. Many technocrats were, in fact, inducted into Roosevelt's administration. And they did quite well. They supported him in what he wanted to do. And that started the mantra back then of science says this, science says that, whatever.
Yeah.
And the expectation of the people is, well, you can't really understand what science is or how it says what it says, but we're telling you, we're smart, we have PhDs. We'll interpret for you what science says, and then you can go do that. Well, this was a bad meme from the start, and we're saturated with it today. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry in the world that has a PhD now seems to be self-qualified to run the world. And they're not qualified to run the world any more than anybody else, you and me or anybody else. That. But you see this everywhere. You see it in the climate change argument. You see it in the pandemic that we're currently experiencing, if you can call it a pandemic.
Right.
The scientists stand up and say, not just what the problem is. You appreciate science, I think, if they're telling you what the problem is. If there is a problem, you'd like to know. If it's scientific, okay, tell me what the problem is. But our problem is they dished up their solution to the problem.
Right.
And the world went along with that. So, oh, wow, that's what we have to do. I traced this entire panic I call it the Great Panic of 2020. I've traced that back to Imperial College originally. They had the first study that came out. Dr. Neil Ferguson, he's the guy that said 500,000 Brits are going to die and 1.2 million Americans are going to die. The University of Washington, by the way, was right behind them, hot on their heels to bring out computer models.
And are you talking about the virus death toll, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about the original forecasts that were simply nothing more than computer models. They had no real data to put into them whatsoever.
But it was going to be a virus, right?
There was a virus already. The virus was already, released in China.
Okay.
Spreading.
Okay.
But in between the time that it actually started in China and the world went panic over here, and well, actually everywhere,
Yeah.
that's when these computer models started showing up, saying that all these people are going to, 500,000 Brits and 1.2 American people are going to die, and some estimates are even higher than that. But the thing is, these were the same kind of computer models that people were using with climate change predictions. The data was faulty.
Yeah, but it works great if you can decide in advance what the data should be.
Well, that's it.
Right.
We used to call that lying with statistics when I was.
Yeah. Well, science has degenerated a little bit, right? I mean, if it was real science, it wouldn't be damaging like it is this way, because science is supposed to be, you want to know whatever's true.
Yes.
But current science is you repeat acceptable information from the rumors.
I want to hasten to say there are many honest practitioners of science in the world. There are many of them, if not the majority, are simply honest. They don't want to control the world. They don't want to dish up policies for everybody else to obey. And they're as honest can be. Of course you make mistakes, but the idea of scientific debate is to put everything on the table and then talk about it, argue about it, prove it this way, that way, try and disprove it, and eventually you come to some pretty good conclusion of what's right. There are plenty of scientists and engineers in the world, I believe, that are very honest. They wouldn't fit in with this crowd at all. But the disingenuous technocrat mindset doesn't view science in the same way that you and I would view science. And so when they figured out they could use science as a prop to get what they wanted done, everything changed.
Right.
Now you have this bastardized science, right? You have this pseudoscience in many cases. It's a misapplication of science, and it's a misapplication of the scientific method. Now, in my opinion, that kind of science should be thrown out in the trash where it belongs and to never come back. It should go to the lab and stay there.
Yeah, it's just propaganda. It's not science.
It's just propaganda. And when the technocrats at Imperial College started in on this originally, and Neil Ferguson was the professor there. He was the guy that made that first model. And by the way, 3 weeks later, when it didn't look like it was working out, he retracted or downgraded his model from 500,000 Brits to 25,000. I'm sorry, but that is a big error. It just shows the faulty nature of a study from the get-go.
Yeah.
And, everything has just been going downhill from then. All of the studies over here that people were panicking over initially, those studies have been completely decimated by real data. Real data. That is data that's been accumulated at Stanford University. They have come out and said, this virus has already penetrated a large part of America. And you see, we can't do all the testing on it. We wouldn't want to do it anyway. That's not the way things work. But Stanford went out and did their own sample of testing in the population. They know how to do that sort of thing. That's what they've done with flu and other things forever. And they came up with a percentage that there was a very large percentage of America that already had the virus. Most of them never knew they had it. Those that did have it just thought they had a cold and got better. And a few people have died. And we're all sorry for the people that died. I'm sorry for anybody that died. I don't want to offend anybody by saying, I'm insensitive to your, family member or a friend that died.
Sure.
But the fact is, all of this panic, this paranoia, has not been driven by science. It's been driven by these technocrats who have used science irresponsibly. And I actually liken it to yelling fire in a crowded theater. Who's responsible for the people that get trampled to death? Well, they yelled fire in a crowded theater. And Neil Ferguson, in particular, he was the guy. He served up policy recommendations at the same time that he panicked everybody. his policy recommendations were exactly what we're seeing today. He said, close down all the schools, all the way up and down, from grade school all the way up, the university, close it down, practice social distancing, stay at home, shut the economic system down.
Right. And I don't think it would be smart for us to think that's incompetence, because that's probably exactly what he was ordered to determine.
It is not. That's right. It is not incompetence. And I studied, I looked a little bit at Imperial College, and this is one of the specialties. In addition to environmental issues and global warming, they're a very sustainable development oriented university. In fact, they're thoroughly saturated with it from top to bottom. They say that in the president's message on the homepage of their website. So this is the same crowd that had been issuing the faulty computer models for climate change.
Yeah.
Forgot the climate hysteria already, it seems like. But remember little Greta Thunberg.
Yeah, she's still busy with that stuff.
She's still out there, but she went to the UN and she scolded everybody there, and she's talked to big groups of people, and she says, you got to set your house on fire to get anything done around here. And they have tried to use the panic of climate change to drive the world into sustainable development. It hasn't been very successful. I think Greta Thunberg was the last straw, personally. And if they couldn't do it with her, this isn't going to happen. Al Gore tried several years ago with his book, Being the Truth. He said, the polar ice caps are going to melt within 10 years.
Yeah.
And, cities are going to be underwater. A lot of people are going to die. And all the polar bears are going to die.
That was 2003 that he said that or something, right?
That's right. And then along comes 2013, and not one thing he said ever came to pass.
Yeah, like a very disappointing pandemic on another level.
That's right. So what kind of science was he smoking? It wasn't at all. It was just propaganda. And we've been hit with a propaganda war in this great panic of 2020 that has no bearing on reality whatsoever. And all of the medical personnel that I have been able to kind of get in front of to listen to, they consistently say a couple of things. I hear it all the time. And by the way, I should say, Dr. Ferguson at Imperial College was an epidemiologist.
Okay.
Most people knee-jerk associate epidemiologist with medicine, with something to do with, wow, it's got to be really good, You got to be smart to be an epidemiologist.
Well, there's a lot of syllables in that word. It has to be good. Right?
It has to be good. But listen, this guy is a mathematician, a statistician.
Right.
That's what epidemiology is. He has no medical training, none whatsoever. He doesn't, okay, maybe he took a biology class or something like that, but the guy is not a medical professional. He does not treat patients. He's not sensitive to that whatsoever. This is the guy that has changed the world, an epidemiologist, a statistician. This is not right. It's just not right. But when I listen to doctors, here's what they say across the board. Number one, the standard MO for any disease is to immediately quarantine the sick.
Right.
Here, number two, we do not quarantine the healthy. We quarantine the sick. This has been for every epidemic that's ever come along in the past however many decades. That's always the standard procedure. And there's reasons for that, for sure. So, this academic group has flipped that upside down. They said, we need to test everybody. We need to quarantine everybody and send everybody home. And in the process, they have killed the economy.
Isn't it interesting that everybody's conditioned to whatever experts say, they have to do it? You don't question the expert.
I know this is a sad, sad state of affairs for the world at this point, and Americans ought to just be flat out ashamed for accepting it. They ought to know
that was
better.
Part of the idea of the founding of America, right? Is that you get rid of authorities and you replace the citizens as the sovereigns. It seems like there are two issues behind a lot of what you're saying. One is the statistics that the professor, the epidemiologist that you mentioned, are not correct by many orders of magnitude. But the other issue that's probably even more important is that even if it was a 90% kill rate, it doesn't change the unalienable rights of the people. So government in America could suggest social distancing, but they can't enforce it if it violates the Bill of Rights and the recognized rights that go beyond the enumerated ones. Right? That was the real difference in the system.
Yes, and that's why a lot of people are really upset right now. It's that this has been used to virtually, at least, suspend parts of the Constitution altogether.
Right.
Simply not right. And how will he ever be able to untangle this? It's still a mystery, because so many governors and so many mayors within those states have issued draconian proclamations,
Right.
mostly through executive order, although there have been some city councils involved where they pass resolutions. But either way, there has been so many violations across the country of the Constitution at this point. How could they ever be settled if we get through this? But again, let me qualify getting through this. Already, the technocrat group that's controlling this whole narrative is not going to let us loose when the so-called curve has been flattened sufficiently. We're at the point right now, for instance, that many states say they're opening back up for business. What does that mean? Well, I took a look at the Center for Disease Control website, found a copy of the guidelines that are being passed out to everybody around the country on how to open up. Okay? It's not, okay, would you people just go home and just get out of our lives? Just let us get on with life here? Go away. But no, they're coming out with a whole raft of regulations to tell companies how they are allowed to restart their businesses. And it's not going to just be throwing the doors open and letting everybody else come back in the restaurant, for instance.
Right. 25%, something like that.
They're specifying a phased re-entry to get back into the economic system. And then they're already saying that this fall, there's going to be another repeat of this whole thing.
Right.
And that businesses should prepare to scale back, to go backwards on those lists of things. Like, okay, guys, we're in phase 3 now, but here comes again. Let's go back to phase 2.
Right, which means most businesses die.
Well, I tell you what, a lot of businesses have already died.
Right,
and will be more. In Arizona right now, a 2-week extension by our governor just a couple of days ago will probably raise our business failure statistic by a disproportionately large percentage. And the reason is they've already had no income for over a month, about 5 weeks now.
Yeah.
Small business can't exist with that.
No, it's very delicate. You can't just do it.
And, having no income, it reminds me, I learned this the hard way when I was in high school. I missed a test. I missed a test in a class that I otherwise did okay in. I missed the test, and the teacher gave me a 0. And all of a sudden, my overall grade average went from a B+ or something to a D+.
Right.
Dog. For missing one test. It was a big fat 0. Okay, just extrapolate that over onto small businesses where guys rocking along, they got 5 employees, 10 employees, whatever. Maybe they have a restaurant or they're making something, a little manufacturing company. And they have a payroll going along. Well, by the time they realize that the payroll has to be cut, they've already spent a good portion of their cash reserve. Now they let their employees go, and they start cutting their business down, hoping that things will just kind of pick up right away.
Right.
This slow bleed of money we've already, in Arizona, we've already experienced that slow bleed of money from emergency funds and savings, whatever some small businesses will have. And now the governor has said he's going to extend it another 2 weeks. That means a big zero for the most sensitive 2 weeks.
Right.
This whole thing. That's the end of it. This is going to be like putting a plastic bag over somebody's head and, suffocating them. When do they actually suffocate? Not at the beginning when there's air in the bag.
Right. Yeah.
In the last 30 seconds when all the air is gone.
And just to clarify, this is a Republican governor who's doing this.
Right.
And it's the same thing in Texas, where they're allowing conditional phased reopening at a level that will destroy a lot of the remaining businesses.
Exactly. This is so devastating, not just to our overall economy, but it's so devastating in particular to a class of people who have employed traditionally some 80% of all employees in America. That's what the stats say. In fact, I heard that even decades ago with the National Federation of Independent Businesses, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
They always said that most of the employees in America are being employed by these smaller companies, under 50 people.
Right.
So people ask, well, hey, is employment going to come back? I got bad news for them, guys. It's going to be very hard because those small business jobs are not going to be there. A lot of them are just going to be gone for good.
Yeah. Well, they're trying to tell people that the answer is don't worry. Just like Greta and AOC and other people have been suggesting, it's not a problem. Just free money from the government, universal basic subsistence income, and you don't ever have to go out of your house.
I know this was an idea that Technocracy proposed back in the 1930s, universal basic income, and it's been repeating on us ever since. Remember Andrew Yang running?
Yeah.
Candidate.
He was ready to send out his own checks right away to get it started.
I know. He was big time into universal basic income, and he was also a self-professed technocrat.
Yeah.
2 and 2 together here.
He said technology was going to solve all the problems.
Right. And, I don't say this in a humorous way, but even Pope Francis about 10 days ago came out in support of universal basic income.
Yeah. I think he's totally in on the whole thing. So just for people and kids and young adults and other people that are being trained on television that, why didn't we think of this before? Just give us the money and forget this stupid work thing. Why is that a bad idea? When you get all this wonderful free money, how could that be bad?
I can't answer it that way. I just can't. I'll tell you what. Here's let's use this let's replace us with the government.
Okay.
Okay. Let's say I'm the government. Now I've got a checkbook and there's no money in it. Or maybe $100.
Yeah.
I start writing checks. And I just tell everybody, oh, it's okay. They might bounce, but it's okay.
Yeah.
And I just start issuing checks to people. You can't do that. If you don't have money in the bank account, you can't write checks. You can't go out and spend stuff. In fact, if you go into a restaurant and eat a meal and then say at the end of the meal, oh, I'm sorry, but I don't have any money, they'll call the cops on you.
But what saves you is there's this wonderful agency above the federal government that's totally beyond their control, unless they were brave enough to shut it down, which they're not at this point. And they don't need real money. They just enter computers and they lend you money at interest that they don't even worry about having. They don't have anything behind it. And right now, they're buying up everything and they're giving everything free for subsistence. That's where the government's getting its money, most of it.
Thin air.
Yeah. So the end result of that, and it's already happening, is that private company called the Federal Reserve is currently buying up controlling interests in all the big corporations. And it's called a bailout.
They are, and they have. They are starting to buy stock now. This is inconceivable. But I will say, when when the Trilateral Commission first picked up this idea back in 1973, the goal from the beginning was to accumulate resources rather than money. Money has always just, we've treated money as a barometer of how much we own. But money really is kind of a mythical thing in a way. You know, you say, well, I have lots of cash in the bank. Well, if your bank blows up, goes out of business, whatever,
Right.
your money's gone. It's very intangible. But with resources, let's say you own, a 25,000 acre cattle ranch in Montana,
Mm-hmm.
that's tangible. Wealth is produced by that land. You raise animals, you have uranium mines and gold mines, and, oil wells and stuff. All wealth in the world has always come out of the ground.
Yeah, including all the food, right?
Including all the food, that's right. So the goal even from back then, I believe, and Tony Sutton and I talked about this even back then, they knew that there was a finite limit to how much the Federal Reserve could chip away at the money supply. Back in the old days, when gold, like in Roman days, when gold was all coins were made out of gold, the bankers would take a very sharp little knife, and they would just kind of shave the edge of the coin a little bit.
Yeah.
And they would, just kind of get enough gold for themselves where they could get rich as the money came through their hands.
Mm-hmm.
It was illegal, but everybody did it. And eventually the coins got down to where they were really small. Well, back in 1973, the wealth that had already been sucked off of the monetary system was probably around 85%. Today, we're about 99% of where it started from in 1913.
Right. Purchasing power, right?
Right. So Rockefeller understood this and this crowd that there was going to be a time when the monetary system would hit the brick wall, could not go any further, and eventually would just be fall apart. But the goal changed from accumulating money to accumulating resources. And they pawned this whole thing off on the United Nations. Starting in 1974, as a matter of fact, the UN issued a proclamation that said it was a declaration of them establishing the new international economic order. Well, that's the same thing that the Trilateral Commission said 6 months earlier. So the UN was involved at an early date, but if you think about what one of the favorite activities of the UN, it's to meddle with other countries' resources. They would like to take over the Amazon, for instance, down in South America, take it away from Brazil.
Right.
They have created these heritage zones all over the planet, locking up important resources where people can't get at them anymore. And there's a bunch of them in America. You've seen the American government buying up real estate, especially in the West, but some in the East as well. Our government now owns, I think it's a little over 30% of the land mass in America.
Yeah, and most of it they didn't even have to buy, they just took.
That's right. And you say, why? The Constitution doesn't provide for land ownership by the government.
No, except for a fort, and that's a really big fort.
That's a really big fort, all right.
Yeah.
So we see that resources of the world are being taken away from people. I want to say people like you and me. I didn't have a whole lot in the first place, but
You're right. That makes you safer.
Yeah, it probably does. But, you've got a lot of ranchers. I mean, look at all the small farmers and stuff that are going out of business right now because of the shutdown. People don't realize they're plowing food underground, like millions of tons of food. Horrible.
Of all kinds. And it's not that the demand for food really is less, because you've got the same number of people eating food as before. So the difference is going to be that it won't be available to buy.
That's right.
It's going to be an issue.
And the farm land will survive because, it can't hurt the land. You can only hurt people operating the land.
It can get rid of the owners.
There will be new owners.
Yeah.
Now, the question is, who will the new owners be?
Right.
Well, the last time, when we've had multiple catastrophes over the last 50 years, but the last time there was a big change of hands was back in 2008, 2009.
Right.
A lot of farmers went out of business back then, and they were gobbled up by the big conglomerates.
Yeah.
And that just tells you exactly where this is going. There's an accumulation of land by the big, huge companies, the really huge companies, and you talk about when you talk about agriculture, we talk about big tech and we talk about big pharma, but when we talk about agriculture, it's not quite as obvious. But some of the companies that are just absolutely huge now, there's only about 6 companies that seem to own everything now in the food chain around the world. You've got companies like Cargill. You've got companies like Nestle. You've got companies like ADM, Archer Daniels Midland. And there's a few others, but you may not be familiar with their names, but there's been this huge consolidation of agricultural interests where a very few number of companies own it. And it's not a monopoly yet, but it's headed in that direction.
Yeah.
A dangerous situation.
Well, and from the health point of view, it's a disaster because the small farms, at least potentially, can produce good food. That's a foundation of the population being healthy. The big ones don't even try to do that. You know, it's all about profit margin and obeying the technocrat bosses. So they'll produce GMO soy, and that's what you're going to eat.
Right. That's right. They've spread this all over the world too. It's not just in America, but
yeah.
The things that was striking for me, and I grew up in an agricultural world, so I'm sensitive to the whole ag thing.
Right.
And as American farmers have been driven out of business, and I believe by and large it's been a very purposeful thing that has caused that.
Yeah.
While the American farmer went out, the supply chain looked elsewhere, especially south. It looked to Mexico, it looked to Argentina, it looked to Chile, Brazil.
Right.
To raise agricultural products outside of the view of our own Food and Drug Administration, which is supposed to, all food inspectors supposed to ensure that we have a decent food supply.
Which, of course, they don't do, but it's even worse in those other countries.
It is. I mean, it's just non-existent. It's just not there.
Yeah, especially food coming from places like China, which a lot of the frozen food comes from there, and other types too. And I hope that you're willing to do some more chapters on this, because this is not something you can do justice to in a few minutes. But in the few minutes that we've got left, which is just a couple, 2 big issues that we'll have to spill over into future installments is the vision of the post. They don't plan to make a post-pandemic world. It's going to be a post-phase 1 pandemic world, and the other is that little issue of solutions.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
You want to say any little teasers about what we can go into on those 2 things in the future?
I'll tell you what, it's one of the reasons I started Citizens for Free Speech a couple of years ago, and that website is citizensforfreespeech.org.
All spelled out, citizensforfreespeech.org.
Right.
Okay.
And I can only say, people don't have to do what I am doing. I did this because I saw the onslaught coming against the First Amendment, which is the watershed of the entire Bill of Rights. If we lose the right to communicate, we're done. I can't think more alarmed about this.
Yeah.
If we effectively lose the First Amendment, that's the right to expression of religion, it's the right to free speech, freedom of the press, the right to peaceably assemble, and the right to redress the government for grievances. If we lose those 5 sub-rights, which are contained in the First Amendment, we are finished.
Yeah.
They put the First Amendment there on purpose. They put the Second Amendment there on purpose in the second position as well.
Right.
That's a scary thought. I don't want to consider what would happen if we lose the First Amendment, but I can tell you it ain't going to be pretty. And it's going to involve the Second Amendment.
Yeah. The Second Amendment has nothing to do with hunting. It's real national security, basically.
It's real national security. I don't even want to consider what would happen with that because it would be so ugly and messy. But if that's what happens in the end, that we can't save the First Amendment, then I don't know. I guess that's what we're going to have to live with.
So for the moment, it would be really good to think about any creative possibilities that avoid having to go that way.
Absolutely, positively. We must communicate. We cannot lose our ability to communicate.
So to learn about all this stuff, I wish we had more time. We have to do another one really soon if you're open to it. For the moment, to learn more about what Citizens for Free Speech actually does, they go to that website, right? Mm-hmm. And then can you give us just a 30-second idea of what the activities are and what somebody does if they want to be involved?
Well, if you if you want to be involved, we have a petition that'll come up on the front page as you see the screen for the first time.
Okay.
Get that petition and sign it if you want. It's basically to maintain our civil liberties during this pandemic, where all the governors, mayors, and so on have shut everything down. But if you dig deeper into it, we have a volunteer system where if you want to volunteer and be active, we have a thriving group now of almost 400 people who have said they want to volunteer for some activity. We have monthly meetings. We use, usually I think we use a Zoom platform to have monthly meetings with our volunteers and to encourage and direct and pass out ideas and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Honestly, we don't have all the answers. But I want to tell you, I tell people this, you don't have to have all the answers to get involved.
Right.
You have to have a desire that you need to do something. Get together like-minded.
The motive has to be there, right? And then the answers can be found. So think about maybe coming back, even if you're able to, in a week and talk primarily about the activities of that organization and how it might fit into an overall solution. Because I think that's what matters. It's not just saying all these terrible things are all happening by design, which is true. It's all right, knowing that, what do you do about it to avoid a catastrophe? And I think that's what you're attempting to do, right?
Yes, we are. But again, I have to say, we have an enemy. If you don't know who the enemy is, what's the point? Right. Anything you do is not going to get you anywhere.
Yeah, no, that's why you have to look at the bad things happening. I'm just saying that's not an end.
That's exactly right. We need to get over the hump of identification of the enemy and then go for that enemy.
Yeah.
And I promise you, we're not going to find that enemy in the left-right, Republican Democrat fight for the national, for the president this November. It's not where the enemy lives.
Right. That's to waste all your energy fighting with each other.
That's right. That's just a dogfight that they would like us to be involved with forever, so that we don't look at them. Those are the people like Neil Ferguson, for instance.
Yeah.
This guy is he's an unelected, unaccountable technocrat who will skate free on everything he's done. And this is not right. See, at least we can hold politicians accountable sometimes.
Yeah, and it would be good to get to their bosses as well.
They're skating free. We cannot let that happen anymore.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thanks for the time, Patrick, and let me know if you can come back next week, and we'll try to arrange that too.
I will. Sounds good. Thanks for your time.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, guys, I ran that up to the wire because I really didn't like letting Patrick go. He's got so much vital information, and we just barely scratched the surface. I think this is not supposed to be an entertainment deal where you just have fun talking about bad things and, oh, this might be a solution, and then you go back to doing everything, the way that we're programmed to do it. We have to actually change some things and become effective in healing this thing that's going on. And it's very, very coordinated. There's so many other aspects involved in it. It's like scam on scam on scam on scam. The virus is real, as we talked about, came out of the labs, and we know a lot about the origin right now. It looks like the president might be figuring out more of the details now too, finally, which has some hope in it, but the population needs to become more conscious. Also, this thing about testing being a condition for reopening is a really terrible idea. And the reason is, number one, I don't have seen no evidence that they even have a test. I think they've got a test for the coronavirus generically, and you can show everybody's got it, which can terrify and explode the numbers and all that stuff. But coronavirus is a huge family, and it's got all kinds of viral members in it that mostly do no harm at all. And if you want to show that this is terrible and everybody's got it, just test for generic coronavirus. Otherwise, they've got to get a sample of the original lab-produced virus, and they've got to get the mutations that it's been in after that to compare to the current tests, and I don't think they're doing that at all. It would be very disappointing because they'd have very few positives, and that would ruin the whole plan. So I don't think an accurate test is coming out anytime soon. I just talked to a medical doctor that had devised a way that he thinks they could do that, and there's no interest in it at all. So, and these conditions for reopening, the video that got banned from the two doctors that were talking from Bakersfield, owners of an urgent care system, their numbers may have not been accurate, but their ideas were. And the main idea to come away with is that the kill rate is irrelevant in America. You have freedom, or the idea that has been forgotten now, that the government can't take away your unalienable rights like the ones in the Bill of Rights or any of the other ones that are implied and just understood. They can't take those away ever, because if those were removable in an emergency, then they would just be a joke, because you just get some tyrannical figure in government and they say, okay, executive order, emergency, you don't have your rights anymore. You can't do that. You can't do it officially in America, but the idea about the American founding documents is that actually you can't really do it in any other country too. You just have to be very strategically careful, because those governments don't agree with you. They think they already own your rights and can take them away or never grant them to you. So there's a lot more we have to talk about. If you want to help keep us on the air, please donate to us. That's the only way we'll keep going. And we want to build a school, and it's time to build the school now. So we need money to do that. I want to run that place, and we have exact specifications and directions for how it has to be done that I can tell you the story about later. It's really interesting, but we need support for that. Not if you're starving and struggling for money, but if you have resources, talk to us, richard@lostartsradio.com. That needs to start now. It's time, based on what's going on in the world. We need to do as much as we can to turn things around before they get a lot worse. The shutdowns are causing millions and millions of people to starve, mostly in the third world, mostly kids. That's already begun. One of the UN-connected authorities came out a couple days ago, I think, and said something like 130 million. We're getting near the edge of starvation now. They said it's from the virus, the pandemic. It's not. It's from the response to the pandemic. The shutdowns are suicide, and that's why they're being imposed. So we need to get into solutions. I'd like to hear your ideas on it. You're welcome to share them at richard@lostartsradio.com, or you can join our private group, which I really recommend if you want to work on these things at a deeper level. But I warn you that it involves primarily working on yourself, because if you don't clean up your own, things in your life that don't make sense, that are not in harmony, get your own health back, learn about the real forgotten laws of nature and the violently suppressed real knowledge of health that you're not supposed to know about right now. And then don't just learn it, apply it on your own body. Get rid of the stupid fake idea of aging and degenerative disease and susceptibility to infectious disease. That's all abnormal the way we're taught now. And we can go into that in the non-censored environment of Planetary Healing Club, and then you can apply it. That's the whole point of it. And the small dues that members pay, because we don't do any commercials at this point, we're not doing that. The members from dues go to the nonprofit, and it keeps us all going. And the access point for that, if you're up to it, is planetaryhealingclub.com. And I'll be there in half an hour with our meeting tonight. And we'll talk about anything that you want to talk about in complete depth, anything related to health, consciousness, or related world events, which is basically everything. And as you get more knowledge yourself and start actually using it, which is the key, your relationships to everybody in your life changes for the better, and you get a mental clarity that you're not used to, energy for doing whatever you need, and then whatever you choose to do for your contribution to the situation in the world, it has a lot more power and effectiveness in it. So that's planetaryhealingclub.com. We have donate buttons on lostartsradio.com and lostartsresearchinstitute.org, and a subscribe star page at subscribestar.com/lostartsradio, and finally on brighteon.com/channel/lostartsradio for a non-censored video platform that needs to be used so it'll keep going and grow. Tomorrow night, great show on the Sunday guest show with Dr. Annie Bukacek about death certificates and what's really going on with those and their part in the whole scam and the purpose of it. And a lot of really, she's a super brave medical doctor, really appreciated. So join us for that too. 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern tomorrow night. And those of you who want to do the Planetary Healing Club private meeting with me, I'll see you in half an hour. Have a great week, and take care of yourself so you can do more for everybody else in your life. That's the first step. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you soon.